All right, so here's where we're going to start off doing some of the different programs. First of all, we're going to do what's called the inner voice. Now, you should have your microphone plugged into a USB port on your computer or on a USB hub that's attached to your computer. We go to Programs, click on that, and here's Inner Voice right here. So remember that we've set up John Doe. I'm the technician. We're going to set up now Inner Voice. So one of the things to look at here is here's our patient, John Doe. Here's the technician named Jeffrey Essen. Now, what this software is about is that there's a medical science of voice recognition where different mental emotional states can be derived by listening to the timbre of somebody's voice. Now, in that case, 12 different segments of imbalance have been identified by these medical experts, and then those were broken down into different frequency sets. This is rather complex if you want to really dive into it, but from our end, just doing a simple scan, we don't have to know that much to get our answers. Now, in this circumstance, we're going to look at this little blank area right here. This is where our timer will be once we hit the start record button. So in that case, when I have somebody set up for this and then we're getting ready to go, and I just have them give me boring information. I just want to get it that we have non-emotional, boring information that's very data-driven. We want to be able to get a baseline score to say, here's how this looks. So if I hit the start record button, there's our 1 second. So my name is Jeff Essen. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I run my clinic in Rosemont, Minnesota. I live at 123 Main Street in Anytown, USA. I have a car. It's a Nissan Rogue. All right, there goes our 20 seconds. Now that gives us enough in 20 seconds to give us a report. Now, all the information was pretty boring. There's nothing too terribly personal about relationships in my life or anything else. What we are looking for is the greater amount of disparity between high scores and low scores. The greater the disparity, the farther they are away from each other in terms of lows and highs, the better that report is going to be. Now, in that case, I'm just going to accept this one because there's enough high scores, there's enough low scores, we can get a decent report. But if somebody were to go through this and they all look pretty much the same, they're either all low, all medium, all high, we want to make sure then to go in and do a second recording. We want to do this recording in, here is my name, my parents' names were, my spouse or partner's name is, my children's names are, my dog's name is. In other words, what we want to gather then is more emotional content voice. And there you should get a greater disparity between some of those different segments in all 12 of these. Now I'm going to hit the accept report here. Now what that gives us is a report. Each one of these is one of the 4 that were farthest off balance. So this is measuring 4 different things that had the highest or lowest scores. The first 3 of those 4 tend to be those that are more current. This is what's happening in your life right now. Here's something that's going to affect somebody's current performance and current health. So things like zone 10 is a musical note of A. The color to it is purple. Now that's all in terms of its vibration. This would cause the eyes to age faster than would otherwise go. And this is about unworthiness versus self-acceptance. In other words, this is a mental emotional state that everyone has all the time. It should be towards balance. We should be more self-accepting, but then unworthiness could actually be a driver to make somebody work harder. We want this for somewhere right in the middle. But if this is off balance, this is likely that somebody is feeling a little bit less than worthy at the moment. Here's some text about this. Now you can go ahead and read through it, but remember that the client will receive all of this as an email. We don't necessarily need to read through all of this because they can read through it in their own time. Okay? Now, zone 12, musical note B, magenta the color, microcirculation to the brain and nerves, cognitive dissonance versus consistency. And again, our text. The third one, zone 9, G sharp, dark blue color, gastrointestinal absorption, suppressed emotions versus appropriate emotional expression. Again, here's our text. Now, the fourth one tends to be that thing, that mental emotional state that is more conditioned over a long time. Tends to be something from childhood or early adulthood. This is the thing that may be the suppressed emotion, the one that may be part of the personality. In this case, musical note F, color green, kidneys, prostate for males, allergies, lower back, craniosacral, musculoskeletal, things like this. This is conditional love versus unconditional love. And again, all these are that kind of thing that we can read on later. Now, what's important here is that we can get what's called the rad tones. You can't hear them currently, but what's going on there is that this is playing a tone that would be corrective to what's going on. In other words, okay, now you can probably hear that tone. That tone would be a balancing tone for the state of being for the first one, our first one up here. So unworthiness versus acceptance. This is playing musical notes that can be balancing for what's going on in that person's mentally emotional state. Remembering that toxins, or emotions aren't toxins. We're not trying to get rid of the emotions. We're not trying to have somebody become emotionless. We're trying to achieve balance within that state of balance in their brain. Now, then what we're going to do is we're going to email the reports. Now, those emails are going to go out. We're going to have the same text that we have here. So again, the person can read over these as they choose to. But the better ones are the attachments of MP3 audio files. These audio files contain those tones that we just listened to. Now, if the client wants to, and this would be healthy for them, they can go onto whatever kind of either their smartphone, a computer, a tablet, that they can open those MP3 files and play those audio tones. It's suggested that they do this a couple times a day, probably in their more quiet times of day, maybe first thing in the morning, last thing before bed. These tend to relax people. These tend to get people into a state of being that they just feel more comfortable. Their mental emotional state starts to correct. And we all have to know that mental emotional health has much to do with how somebody does physically. And we saw, given some of these, that we had physical conditions, systems, parts of our body, and metabolism that are relative to our mental emotional state. So you can see in the middle of the screen, we have a success sending the email. We click OK. That means all that information now is in the client's email box. Then we can close this out. Now, if you really want to, you can get into some of these complex, different kinds of reports and analyze this all you want. Honestly, unless you're an expert in that field, you're probably not going to make that much headway as far as understanding what that all means. But that's the inner voice program, simple as can be. It can be run very quickly. We can get our reports out. We don't have to belabor it or spend a lot of time working with it. We just want to see if we can get this done to give that person a little bit more support as they go home from their session. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.